And I'm going to go here, pause. All right. So,
One, to know that they all stem from the same problems.
okay. Okay, so what I have here, I have a gentleman that came on stereo some while back. He's an atheist, and he is an atheist debater. And what I was doing is I came back, I recognized his voice because I have another recording on my YouTube atheist, Truth versus Skeptics playlist on YouTube, where I have him, and I was starting to debate him, and I kind of was debating him, but we had a really long conversation, and I immediately it didn't take me long to recognize that the guy was very slippery, and he was a master equivocator, and someone who just does not want to admit certain things. That one of the big things back then I noticed, and it still is that he didn't want to say that he rejected God, that he was a rejecter of God. He wanted to say, no, I have an agnostic position or whatever, and he goes into this whole song and dance. He's one of those who will say that he's an atheist slash agnostic, okay, as though that would make sense. Obviously, apparently, they're changing the definitions of these things of people who deny God, and and it's a whole convoluted mess as to decide what he is. And so, this is going to be a very long video. I was in the mall, I was busy with my family, and I was sending him messages back and forth. And as usual, I couldn't really have the leisure of sitting down and talking to this guy. But there's a number of equivocations that you're going to see that he's making in this video. I'm testing this video. I may have to re-record this video. My sound isn't exactly what I want it to be. I'm not able to use a microphone, but I have to use external recording. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play and I'm going to see how far I can get into this review of this conversation. And I pretty much debate him online because I kept calling in and leaving him messages. But I want to fill in some of this back and forth that we're having on this podcast. So I may be doing some fast forwarding and stuff like that too.
And that's why um, I tend to just look at the professional debaters who debate those areas and know more about those different religious sets than I do. And, you know, and then every time I talk to a Muslim, they say, you got to read the Quran. You have to read it. And I'm like, it's written by a man. Is it not? Like that. Like the problem that a person has with the problem that I have with the Bible is that it's written by a man. It's not written by God.
Okay. So he says it's not written by man, right? So to get things started on a cohesive situation in terms of a debate, well, you have to kind of set your decide what you're actually debating, right? And from the starting gate, you have to say, okay, what is your worldview and what is your worldview? Okay? So in the Christian worldview, the person who believes in God is believing in the revelational evidence that God has provided. Their whole standard is in what is revealed, which is the scriptures. And so within the narrative of the Christian worldview, we know that God spoke to men and he gave them the revelation, the truth. And so that is the narrative of the scriptures. So if a person says, well, you can't use that because that is not proven, right? But see, it's not about what's proven. We're arguing from the worldview. You haven't proven that it's not proven, right? You haven't, because that's what his whole stance. He's saying that he's agnostic. So he's not in any position. What he has to do an internal critique of my worldview in order to defend his own, right? So the question is, well, that's my worldview. If God exists, right, and we admit that you cannot prove God doesn't exist, and you cannot prove that God does exist. So from that position, you cannot tell me that I cannot. This is my worldview, and I believe that God has revealed, right, that in the scriptures, and I could go back to the scriptures and show you what it says, that God spoke through individuals. Now, the problem with him is that he says, well, he can't believe in the God worldview because he says that in the Bible was written by men. But that's maybe from his worldview. He may not believe the Bible, but from my worldview, that there is a God could communicate to his people. And so that is actually what the text says, that he spoke to people, and what they spoke was from the Holy Spirit. So the issue is that from my worldview, I can make sense of it. I could ground my worldview in that I can believe the Bible, because in my worldview, God has given the revelation. So in his worldview, he says it's written by men, but now he's cutting himself off based on anything that's written by man. He's shutting himself down concerning what is written. That means he cannot believe the newspapers, history books, science journals. Why? Because they're all written by men, and infallible men, or rather fallible men at that. So right off the bat, he is shooting himself in the foot.
It is a claim by a bunch of different men for which we have no records of Moses. We have no way of knowing if Moses.
So by that same standard, you cannot believe in Genghis Khan, okay? You cannot believe in George Washington. You cannot believe in any historical figure of time, even though our laws, like for instance, Caesar's, he probably doesn't believe in Caesar, that Caesar ever existed, right? By that claim, you cannot use historical documents to establish whether somebody existed or not, right? By that same claim.
It was real, was alive, and yet he was contributed.
So most scholars believe that there was actually a Jesus of Nazareth, and there's witnesses in written sources in a good number of manuscript evidence and historical documentation that says that Jesus spoke of Moses. So Jesus himself, being an historical figure, wrote about the historical figure of Moses, which goes back into further back into recorded history.
Sorry about that. Yet he was contributed to writing Genesis, Exodus, and I believe Numbers. But it's always something I can Google. But we have no way of knowing. I have a message here.
So thanks for the invite. I can't come up because I'm not exactly somewhere where I could be consistent on the panel, but I will ask you though, concerning the Christian God, the one of the biblical revelation, the one of the God who is the creator of all things, that is the Christian worldview God, God being the one who has created all things and who is responsible for all things that are, can be, and cannot be. That God, how is it that you say that God does not exist? Do you have absolute knowledge of his unexistence?
No, BX Blues, and I wouldn't make the claim to say that he doesn't exist. I wouldn't say he doesn't exist. I would say I am unconvinced that he does exist. I haven't seen any convincing evidence to suggest that he does exist. So when you
So his shtick is, and this is the funeral of all of these so-called atheists, that they argue, and they want to argue using philosophical thinking, and they want to tout scientific evidence for the measure of truth, and stating that the empirical analysis is the best way, the natural analysis of what is real, of what can be known by way of the senses, is the ultimate way of knowing what truth is, right? So here they say that they could be wrong about the evidence of God. And he wants to, and I'm going to demonstrate to this man that he is not neutral because of the so-called, his definitions of how he describes his worldview. His world, he's still in inconsistency. No matter how much song and dance he does in order to define what his position is, right? In the question about God and not God, he is still equivocating. And on top of that, very inconsistent. Because what I'm going to demonstrate to him, and he doesn't see where I'm coming yet, I'm establishing who God is in the Christian worldview. And I'm going to tell him that God, that Christian God, you do deny him. Because there's nothing worse for an atheist, and that is to be cornered in inconsistency and by way of their own admission, right? And so he's going to admit, just like he did now. Okay, he could start, burying himself right now, because he basically says, no, I can't, I don't have evidence. I don't have confidence in that there is a God. I do not say that there isn't a God. Okay, so he neither knows, believes, or has confidence of either the proposition of God or not God. But he also does not live as though he believes that God could be real. So while he's saying that there's a he cannot say that God is not real, he is not living according to the thought that perhaps that he doesn't have the confidence that he is not real. So he can't say he's not real, but he's not living as a Christian. So he's, in essence, living an arbitrary, contradicting, and hypocritical existence, because he has just as much information about God being real or not real. But he chooses to live a life where he does not go to church, he does not worship, he does not congregate with other believers, he does not pray. He openly admits this. And by the time he recognizes that he's digging a hole for his very grave, he's going to then wake up and try to equivocate with the obvious inconsistencies that he's dug himself into.
look at the definition for atheist, maybe it's because I have atheist up here, atheist versus theist.
He's going to go into this whole painful, migraine-inducing equivocation as to what it really means to be an atheist and what he is, and I cannot bear to listen to that again. So it's just a real high caliber quality mumbo jumbo gobbledygook nonsense, and I will try to spare
Maybe
you.
that's the confusing part. Atheists, when you look at the definition of atheist is the
No thanks.
definition. In
I
the
skipped.
atheistical definition,
See, I skipped it, and he's still going through this definition. Let me see how far I can get. See, I don't have this timestamp.
the church, I don't pay tithe.
Right.
Um,
See, he's going into his behaviors. He's admitting he does not go to church. He does not tithe. He lives as a person who knows he's living as a person who is not confident with the proposition that God does not exist, but he's living that way. He is living as though he would be confident that God does not exist, right? As an atheist, he doesn't go to church, he doesn't pay tithes, he doesn't pray. So he's living as someone who believes that God, or has confidence that God does not exist. But he hasn't proven that. He has just as much proof that God exists or God doesn't exist. So he is absolutely, my goodness, where'd I go with this? Oh, brother. Okay. I'm gonna have to edit that. Okay. So he's living as a person who who has the confidence that God doesn't exist. Right when he says that he cannot say that God does not exist, he's still living as though he has the confidence that he does not exist.
So yeah, so if you were to look at my life, from a bird's eye view, you would be like, okay, that person is definitely a non-believer.
There you go. You see, if we catch him living from a bird's eye view, he says he admits that he does not live like a God believer. Okay, we would say that he lives as though he lives like a non God believer, like a God denier. Okay, but you heard earlier that he said that he does not say God does not exist. That means that there is a possibility, that there is that he cannot deny that God does exist. He can't deny it, right? So he's, in essence, he indeed is contradicting himself from his lifestyle and based on his worldview and how he is. And what do we call that? Someone who's living an arbitrary life. Somebody who's living arbitrarily between one thing and another. He picks one life over the other arbitrarily, and it's really hypocritical and highly inconsistent. Okay? Because the only people that should live like non-believers are non-believers. The only people that should live like believers are believers. But here you have someone who can't say that they don't believe God exists, right? They can't say God doesn't. They can't say God does not exist, but he's living as though he would say that.
So yeah, so like my actions would just look like you wouldn't be able to distinguish me
Non-believer.
as an atheist agnostic who lacks belief from an atheist agnostic who disbelieves. Which is why I hate those. I hate that those words are combined now. I wish there was an anti. I wish they kept anti-theistical definition.
I'm not interested in those
But yeah, that
definitions.
doesn't bother me. So let's see here.
So you're telling me that you're so neutral that someone would be observing your behaviors and they would not be able to know whether you're a churchgoer, a Christian, or a non-churchgoer. Is that what you're telling me? So here I'm basically getting him to dig his heels in and to tell me, no, I live as a non-believer. I live as a non-believer. In case he wants to say that it's ambiguous. Here I have him insisting that his life does not represent a believer's life. Okay? He's going to be telling you that no, his lifestyle is definitely as though God does not exist, right? He's not living the God worldview lifestyle, even though he cannot deny it. Even though he could not say that he knows for sure that God does not exist. Okay? That shows his arbitrary lifestyle and his inconsistent lifestyle and his hypocritical lifestyle.
No, I think I'm saying the same thing.
Yes, you
I'm
are.
saying A person would be able to tell I am not a Christian.
There you go.
However, I express that a person wouldn't be able to tell whether I lack belief or whether I disbelieve. Because both a
That is incredibly uninformative and irrelevant because the same person would be living the same lifestyle. So that with regard to making sense and that with regard to reality is not relevant. Okay? The fact is that you deny him. You deny him by your lifestyle, but you can't deny, you cannot say he doesn't exist, but you still deny him by your lifestyle. I'm getting all these pop-ups right now.
believer and a person who is a lack of belief would both live the same way. They will both live as not Christian. But I definitely live my life as not a Christian. So yeah,
Right?
there's no part of me that you would observe that you would confuse me with being a person who is a Christian, at least by any meaningful definition of a Christian. I don't go to church. I don't pay tithes. I don't pray.
There you go.
So yeah, so I hope that answered that question. But yeah, so I'm only going into further detail about you made the statement that the two ideologies you can have three ideologies, but you can only have two different lifestyles. And what I'm saying is that that's true. You can have three.
Honestly, for this information, all is needed is two lifestyles. Okay, he's defining his worldview in three different ways or two different ways. That's irrelevant for where I want to go. I want to show everyone that this man says one thing but lives another one. Okay, he says he cannot. He's not confident to say that God does not exist, but he does live as though God does not exist. That's a contradiction in his lifestyle. That's inconsistency in his lifestyle, and that's hypocrisy in his lifestyle. Because think about it, if God were real, if you believed, right, if you could say, God, I believe God exists, you know that you must worship him. You would love him. You would bow to him. You would worship him. You would go to church with other believers. You would find the necessity to live that lifestyle. Okay? But he can't say that God does not, he can't say that God does not exist. Okay? Even though he can say, well, I can't say that God does exist. Okay? Regardless, but he's saying that he's neutral. But he's not neutral based on his lifestyle. Based on his lifestyle, he lives as though a person who believes that God does not exist. This is the atheistic absurdity lifestyle.
Ideologies and then a separate lifestyle. In this case, a neutral position and a negative position would cause you to live the same type of lifestyle. Both of those people wouldn't go to church. Both of those people wouldn't pray. Both of those people wouldn't.
But now notice he said a neutral lifestyle. There's nothing neutral. There's nothing neutral. He tried to make it neutral by saying that he couldn't prove, he couldn't say that he believes yay or nay on the existence of God. Because of that, he thinks he's being neutral. No, you can't have it both ways. You cannot say I'm eating an apple and I'm not eating an apple at the same time at the same way. But that's what he's trying to do. He's trying to tell you that he is on this social media app and not on this social media app in the same way and at the same time. That's what he's trying to sell you. But he's failing miserably.
Um, wouldn't pay tithe. So yeah, so that's all I'm saying. But no, you would be able to tell that I'm not a Christian just observing my life. I'm waiting on this ringing to stop. What's his name? Outro? Outro. That question
Attack on God.
is you've never heard of God in your life. Let's say I'm a person who's never ever heard of God. Um, I don't have a neutral belief. I don't have a positive belief. I don't have a negative belief. I've just never heard of God ever. And then someone comes to me. So I have the default position. Someone then comes to me and they say, "Hey, have you heard of God?" And then I ask them all the questions. And then after our conversation, I now have a position on it. Before I ever heard of God, I already lived my life a particular way that was absent of church, tithes, and praying. And then what that person failed to do was present me with a way to change my life, to change my behavior. All they've done is all they've done essentially is given me information, but they haven't satisfied the burden of proof for the information. So I just go back to living my life the way I was living it, as if I had never heard of God anyhow. So it's like I don't know how you would live a neutral life. Like I wouldn't like I'm not gonna go to church half of the week and then go to church. Like I'm not gonna go to church half for the year and then pray half the time.
See, I'm glad I'm glad he's saying this because he's basically sinking himself deeper. He's making the pit the in the cemetery. He's going from 4 feet and he's going deeper to 6 feet just by demonstrating my point that it doesn't matter whether you didn't believe or you didn't know and now you've been informed and you reject. It doesn't matter. You're still in the position where you're in the God rejector area, right? So he's digging in himself deeper in the pit by demonstrating that you can't be neutral. And that's exactly what I'm saying. You cannot be neutral, especially he's demonstrating. He tried to say that he's neutral by way of his self-identification of atheism, agnostic atheism, whatever. But he's demonstrating to you now how it's even more vivid an explanation to show you that there is no neutrality because the way one lives is more than enough evidence of what they truly believe, right? And whether they're consistent in their lives, whether they're hypocrites in their lifestyle, that's like a preacher who is a bank robber by night. Okay, that's exactly what a person who doesn't practice what they preach. That's the textbook definition of hypocrisy, a hypocritical lifestyle, inconsistency in one's life, and he's demonstrating that to you right here, right now.
And then because that's not how the ideology works. It doesn't work in that way.
So we know that there are many ideologies that are convoluted and outside of the scope of reason and proper and mental health. We know that not every ideology makes sense or are true ideologies based on the status of people's able to reason or their capacity to reason.
So you're living in a physically arbitrary life because you can't prove God or you can't prove He exists. He doesn't exist, but you physically live as though He does not exist.
This is where he starts to wake up to finally see what I'm basically getting at, and now he starts to equivocate with the argument.
in an arbitrary, I think I understand what you mean. Um, yeah, most of my positions
What I'm saying is that you're lying to yourself.
are probably arbitrary. I would say the reason I do a lot of stuff would probably be because of an arbitrary basis that I have. I am a product of my environment of being an American, and then I have a bunch of laws that I abide by that I've grown up around and I've grown to agree with. But the basis of them would still be.
Yeah, he still isn't fully getting what I'm saying. He doesn't. He's thinking more general. He doesn't realize that what I'm attacking is his identification of himself with respect specifically to the identification of his worldview in the God, not God worldview. And this idea that he's neutral simply because he identifies himself a certain way as not rejecting God in a certain way. The lifestyle that he lives clearly demonstrates his non-neutrality and his inconsistency within his worldview.
Arbitrary. So yeah, I can say that. Yeah, I have an arbitrary basis for a lot of things. I don't know if that's like everything, but I can definitely see if that's where you're going. I'm not sure if that's where you're going with it, but if that's where you're going,
I presented this to him later on, like 2 days later, and he was ready for it. He was ready to equivocate around it. He didn't have a good comeback for it. I wish I could have recorded it and added it to here, but he had really no good comeback for it. Not that there even is a good comeback to it. All you have is equivocation, because how are you going to prove that you're neutral when you're living a lifestyle that's arbitrary to what you say you believe? You say you believe that you have no confidence to deny God, and you have no confidence to believe in God. So where else are you going to go from there? Your lifestyle, just like he said, I can't go to church one week and not go to church one week. I can't live that according to he. It seemed like he understood what I was talking about there, but here he still hasn't gotten to it. He eventually will, and he won't have a good response to it.
yeah, I have some arbitrary basis for like I'm like you would have to ask me specific questions for different narratives. So it's like yeah, I kind of dress arbitrarily. I I have hobbies arbitrarily. Yeah, I date arbitrarily. They're all made up based off what I want in my brain. So they don't come from anywhere other than a combination of experiences and being a product of the environment of a lot of different things. So, oh wow, we got 5 votes. 80% are theists. 20%. Oh, okay. It's just I'm still the only one who voted atheist. A date of the Torah.
Existence, reality, life.
I would love. I can't wait to have you on the panel whenever you get some free time that you are reading me about God at all. If I had never been told about God, I live my life today that exact same way. So I don't live my life in an arbitrary way towards the ideal of God.
Yeah, yes, you do. You see how he still wants to maintain that he's not living arbitrarily towards God, but he is. But he completely is, and he admitted to it when he says that he does not go to church one day and the next day not go to church.
Do you think it's a healthy thing or a normative thing or a positive thing to live life arbitrarily with regard to like the really big ticket items, issues of existence, reality, life?
See, I'm trying to get him to recognize, and zero in exactly what I'm talking about. And he still isn't waking up. And I can tell no one's given him or brought this argument to him. But it's an incredibly simple argument and an argument that atheists cannot, they can't speak around it because it's not really your ideology has nothing to do what you say your ideology is. Your lifestyle proves, okay, what you truly believe, and it doesn't matter if you call yourself a agnostic slash atheist to the fifth power, up down, rubble cake, whatever. It doesn't matter what you call yourself. What your lifestyle demonstrates is what you are. And with regard to the argumentation of God, not God worldviews, that's all that it takes. That's all it takes to know.
I would love. I can't wait to have you on the panel whenever you get some free time. Um, I don't know if that's towards God. No, but I give you an example. This is one question I ask a lot of people, and I have another bubble I got to play. But I ask them. I say, can you demonstrate that you are real and you're not in a simulation? And most people just admit that they can't. It's one of the most important questions you can ask yourself. And the psychology suggests that no one can answer that question.
So I find it blows my mind that he says that no one could answer that question. I'm thinking he must not have ever really had too many debates with Christians. Because if he ever had a debate with a Christian, and a Christian cannot argue past that silly question, I say, can you prove your existence? I say, yeah, I could prove my existence. I trust my senses and my worldview because we are discussing my worldview. You cannot say that I do not have my worldview. And I live in my authority is backed by the universal of God. And even if you say, well, I don't believe in your God, that's still not, it doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. Where I'm speaking about my worldview, where we already know you deny the evidence for my worldview. That's my position. But the truth of the matter is that the evidence of my worldview is that you cannot demonstrate the grounding of all the things that you claim to know, believe, or have confidence in if you deny the existence of God. And so that's why you get stuck thinking that you can't prove your way out of a matrix because you don't have a universal to fall back on. You don't believe in God. So my God has spoken. I have a revelational epistemology. That's how I know things. And so God says that he's real, and he says we're living in him. And my thoughts, I think my thoughts after him. So I can demonstrate even in scripture where reality makes sense. You see, so that's my worldview. You cannot argue what my worldview is. You can't argue against my worldview. That's my worldview. That's where my responses are going to come from. So we basically demonstrate my worldview against your worldview. You cannot say, well, that's not what you truly believe. You can't prove that. I say, yeah, I could prove that. I could prove that because by you asking me that question and making the comment that you cannot demonstrate your existence, outside of a matrix, then you've already demonstrated that you cannot ground your own sense perception. You cannot even have confidence that you're not you're not in a matrix. Okay, you've already been ruled out for trusting your very senses. I can say I can trust my senses because God says that he is real and that he has given me the knowledge that is his, right? And so I'm not stuck in a matrix. I cannot be stuck in a matrix, okay? But what is the standard and what is the universal that dictates, the grounding for you to be able to trust your senses? He doesn't have that, okay? He doesn't, and he cannot evoke anything to demonstrate that he's not in the matrix.
Any truth behind it. You can't tell the difference between a simulation, a simulated reality, and real reality. But it doesn't stop you from wanting to be loved. It doesn't stop you from wanting friends. It doesn't stop you from needing.
See, he says it doesn't stop you, but if you can't tell that you're not in the matrix, what makes you think that you are identifying what love is? What makes you think that you're identifying what friends is, or the necessity for friends? You've already stopped your senses in the confidence in your own senses at your own reality, at reality as a whole, and trusting your senses. Why would you then trust your senses with regard to love? That makes absolutely no sense. You see how the worldview, the atheistic worldview, is a worldview of absurdity?
Resources to survive. Whether you need to eat food because you're in a simulation simulating that you need to eat food, and if not, you're going to die. Or it's the reality that you need to eat food because the reality is that if you don't, you're going to die. They both end up with the same consequence. So that's one of the most important questions you can ask yourself. I don't think the God question is one of the most important things that can be asked.
I find that funny that he says that, the bigger question is whether, I would basically say that he's saying that how can you ground reality? How can you the ground the existence of your reality is the bigger question. But yet, my universal allows for me to be able to ground reality, right? He doesn't have that. He denies that. So he's stuck in the matrix because he has no grounding for reality.
If it wasn't so tied into the culture in which we came from, I think the only reason it's so important is because it affects everyone everywhere. But if there was a way for me to live in a country that was secular, then it wouldn't be an important question at all.
What up, Droids? Shalom. Welcome to Stereo.
God existed. So that's not saying much. So you're living as though there is no God, and if no one would have told you, you still would live the same way. So yeah, that's not saying much.
Well, it what it says is that neutrality is the exact same. Basically, you have the burden of proof to demonstrate whatever claim that someone is making. If someone's making a claim, if they're making a claim that's going to change your behavior, they have to convince you that their claim is real. Otherwise, your behavior should not change. Because
Well, truth actually doesn't work that way. Like, I don't need to prove the truth of how airplanes work in order to say that the airplanes work, right? You don't need to demonstrate anything. And not only that, but evidence is as evidence does, and every single person evaluates their evidence based on their presuppositions. So if you're willing and you have a presupposition to deny certain realities or certain evidences, that's what you're going to do. But it doesn't mean that you're either wrong or you're right. That necessarily does not always follow.
in between for your behavior, as you just pointed out. So the either what you're saying is real, and I need to start praying and going to church, or what you're saying you haven't demonstrated it to be real, or it's false. Either one.
Exactly. So if you're denying the evidence that demonstrates that God is the cause of all that is, can be, and cannot be, and you want to deny that evidence because you are set to do so because of your own personal presuppositions, then you're not going to live regardless. But it doesn't mean that the person telling you to change your ways is wrong. It just means that you're denying that evidence because of your presuppositions.
Those, I would end up in the same position of not praying and not going to church and not paying tithes.
Well, with regard to the Christian worldview, if you understand the arguments of the Christian worldview, you understand that God makes us believe. Salvation is by grace through faith, and that's initiated by God. And so, with the critical thinking and the understanding He gives us, we're able to validate what He has done for us. You see, so we are such that we can believe and have faith in our senses.
So at this point, I'm going to end it here because the video is becoming too long. But what he does is he says that he has me explaining the Christian worldview, right? While God is the one who validates what we believe, right? He says, well, how is it that you believe? How can you trust your senses? Well, number one, I say, well, the Bible validates the fact that I believe. So I believe, then I go back and you say, well, how can you trust your senses? Could you be wrong about what the Bible is saying? I say, well, no, I can't be wrong because not only do I believe, but then I look back at the revelation and I recognize that God is validating based on His special revelation what He has given me. So He is the initiator. And he says, well, then if God initiates, then that means that I should be believing. But then I say, well, no, but that is in the eternity past of those who will believe. In the here and now, you have to repent by way of command and mandate by God. And so this is the determinism that many Christians, many non-believers do not understand in terms of the Reformed perspective of interpreting the revelation of God. And so what they don't understand is that God is sovereign over what He has decided before time ever was, but He's also sovereign over our decision to select Him and to repent and to heed His call. So we're not out of the responsibility and the accountability of repenting and coming to Him either. Okay, so that's what he wanted to do, and I really wanted to show this example of how this master equivocator tries to get out of saying that he wants to get out of saying that wants to say that he is neutral because of his the ideology that he's hidden behind based on the definition of atheism and atheist agnostic. He thinks he has a neutral ground on the situation in terms of his ideology, but I demonstrated in this video that he does not, based on his living lifestyle. While he says he cannot prove or cannot say that God doesn't exist or does exist, he sure does live as though God does not exist. That demonstrates his lifestyle in inconsistency and also in hypocrisy. Okay, so I hope you enjoy this very long, drawn-out, philosophy-laced video, and until next time, God bless.